Hello. Today we're going to talk about the demographics of the Asian American client. Asian Americans were the fastest growing racial group in the United States from 1980 to 2000, with their population nearly doubling, 179% during that period. The 2010 census, which divides the larger group into two subgroups, reports an Asian population of 14.6 million, or almost 5% of the general population, and Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander population at 0.2%. This represents an increase of 43% and 35% respectively for the 10-year period. Projections into the future estimate a population increase from 5% in the United States total in 2010 to 9% by the year 2050. Like the other cultural groups that we've discussed in this course, Asians represent a diverse collection of ethnic groups with various languages, cultures, and in some cases a long history of intergroup conflict and hostilities. Included in this collective are 43 ethnic groups, 28 in the Asian category and 15 in the Pacific Islander category, based on census data. Included in the former are individuals who identify themselves as Asian, Indians, Chinese, Filipino, Korean, Japanese, and Vietnamese, and in the latter are individuals from Hawaii, Guam, and Samoa. Just to give you some examples. With changes in the Immigration Act of 1965 and large-scale immigration from Southeast Asia and other parts of the Asian continent, relative percentages of Asian American subgroup size changed dramatically. According to the 1970 census, Japanese were the most populous, followed by Chinese and then Filipino. By 1980, however, Japanese were in third place, with Chinese moving to first and Filipino to second. As of 2000, Chinese represents the largest Asian subgroup in America. Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders make up only 5% of the Asian population in the U.S. Most Asian Americans come from recent immigrant families. During the 1990s, immigrants were in fact responsible for 2/3 of the growth of the overall Asian population. In 1998, for instance, 59% were foreign-born, 74% arriving since 1980. Many Chinese and Japanese Americans, however, have been here for 3 or more generations. Originally a source of cheap labor in the economic development of the Western United States, their history was one of extensive suffering and racial discrimination. Legislation enacted in 1790 excluded Asians and other non-whites gaining citizenship by limiting citizenship to free white residents. Because most Asians were foreign-born and not citizens, they could legally kept from owning land or businesses, attending schools, or living in upper white neighborhoods. Asian immigrants were not eligible for U.S. citizenship until 1952. The 1879 California Constitution barred the hiring of Chinese workers, and the Federal Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 halted the entry of most Chinese until 1943. The 1907 Gentlemen's Agreement and a 1917 law restricted immigration from Japan and a barred zone, known as the Asian Pacific Triangle. During World War II, Americans of Japanese ancestry were interned in camps by executive order signed by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Recent Asian and Pacific Islander immigration has followed 2 streams. One came from countries such as China and Korea, which already have large populations in the United States. The majority of these were college-educated and entered under special employment provisions. The second stream came from Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. After arriving post-Vietnam War to escape persecution in their own home countries. Most were poor and uneducated. As a group, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders make up 49% of the U.S. population, are concentrated in the western United States, with the largest urban populations located in Los Angeles and New York City. 60% of the Chinese population reside in California and New York. 2/3 of the Filipino and Japanese live in California and Hawaii. Koreans and Asian Indians tend to be more dispersed, with the largest concentrations in states such as California, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, and Texas. Southeast Asians, on the other hand, can be found in unexpected pockets of the population as a result of governmental resettlement policies. For example, 40% of the Hmong population in 1990 resided in Minnesota and in Wisconsin. Unlike African Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans, Asian Americans have been quite successful economically and educationally, even in comparison with the white population. In 2002, the median income in an Asian household was over $65,000, when it was over $54,000 for white households and $38,000 for African American households. Asian Americans, in addition, account for 30% of minority businesses. Although they account for only 13% of the non-white population, they also score high on business ownership rates. And Asians and whites graduate from high school pretty much at the same rate, approximately 90%, but the former are more likely to complete 2 or more years of college. In 1990, 13% of the Asian and Pacific Islander population earned graduate and professional degrees, in comparison to 9% of whites, and 3 to 4 times the rate of other minorities. Because of such statistics and cultural tendency to defer and not compete openly with white Americans, Asian Americans have been described as a, quote, model minority. A veritable success story. However, we see this image as a myth based on incomplete data that serves to validate the erroneous belief that any ethnic group can succeed if only they work hard enough, stimulate intergroup conflict, and shortchange Asian communities from needed resources. One author offers the following facts needed to be understood. High median income does not take into consideration the number of wage earners, the level of poverty among certain Asian subgroups, or the discrepancy between education and income for Asian workers. Education in the Asian community is bimodal. That is, there are both highly educated and uneducated subpopulations. Asian towns and large urban areas represent ghettos with high unemployment, poverty, and widespread social problems. Underutilization of services does not necessarily mean a lack of problems, but in fact may mean they have alternate explanations, such as face saving, shame, or families' cultural tendencies to keep personal information hidden from the outside world. In short, the belief in Asian success does not mean that there is any less racism or discrimination directed towards Asian Americans, or that there are not serious problems within crowded urban enclaves. Family and cultural values. One author offers the following description of traditional Asian families. In traditional Asian families, the family unit, rather than the individual, is highly valued. The individual is seen as the product of all the generations of his or her family. The concept is reinforced by rituals and customs such as ancestor worship, family celebrations, funeral rites, and genealogy records. Because of this continuum, individuals' personal action reflects not only on themselves, but also on their extended families and as ancestors. Obligations and shame are mechanisms that traditionally help reinforce societal expectations and proper behavior. An individual is expected to function in his or her clearly defined roles and positions in the family hierarchy, based on age, gender, and social class. There is an emphasis on harmonious interpersonal relationships, interdependence, and mutual obligations or loyalty for achieving a state of psychological homeostasis or peace, coexistence with family and other fellow beings. Family and gender roles and expectations are highly structured. Fathers are the breadwinners, protectors, and ultimate authorities. Mothers oversee their home, bear and care for children, and are under the authority of the father, husbands, in-laws, and at times even sons. Male children are highly prized, and the strongest bond within the family is between mother and son. Children are expected to be respectful and obedient and are usually raised by an extended family. Older daughters are expected to play a caretaking function with younger siblings. Traditional Asian values differ dramatically from those of whites, middle-class American culture. Immigration brings the strong possibility of cultural conflict within the family. One author differentiates 5 Asian American family types that sheds light on some of the relation between this cultural conflict. Number 1, traditional families are largely untouched by assimilation and acculturation. They retain cultural ways, limit their contact with the white world, and tend to live in ethnic enclaves. The second, cultural conflict families are typified by traditional parents and acculturated, Americanized children who experience intergenerational conflict over appropriate behavior and values. They exhibit major role confusion and lack agreed-upon family structures. Third, the bicultural families tend to include acculturated parents born either in the United States or in Asia and exposed to Western ways. They are professional, middle-class, bilingual, and bicultural. Family structures tend to be blending of family styles, but with regular contact with traditional family members. The fourth, Americanized families have taken on the ways of the majority culture, with ties to traditional Asian culture fading and little interest in connecting to ethnic identity. And the fifth, interracial families representing marriage with a non-Asian partner where family styles from the two cultures have been successfully integrated, or there is significant value and style conflict. One other author similarly identifies 5 potential value conflicts that may arise between Asian American clients and Western-trained social service professionals. So here is where professionals who may be working with Asian clients may find potential cultural conflicts. Asian clients value a collective and group focus that emphasizes interdependence, in comparison with Western philosophies which emphasizes the independent action. The next is Asians tend to be most comfortable with hierarchical relationships in comparison with a Western view that emphasizes on equality in relationships. Next, you have Asian cultures see the restraint of emotion as a sign of human maturity. And then with the Western professionals, we may see likely that emotional expressiveness is part of a healthy life. Traditional Asian clients will expect the professional to provide solutions, but in Western philosophy, professionals will encourage finding one's own solution through introspection. Lastly, mental illness and emotional problems are seen within the Asian context as shameful and indicative of family failure, in contrast with Western philosophies, which views mental and physical illness similarly. Studies have shown that when Asian Americans do seek professional helping services outside of their community, they tend to present with a variety of problems, including value conflicts with parents and families, difficulties regarding identity issues, acculturation, extreme work ethic, and family obligations. And now, once again, I offer you the additional information and resources provided within this week's module, as well as within the readings, for additional information on this topic, target population.